Good morning, everyone. This session is designed to cover what we call the timesheet warehouse or employment tracking. Basically, what the timesheet warehouse is designed to do is to record timesheet information, hours worked, quantities completed. So basically, your basic timesheet data. So if you have people that has worked certain hours, you charge them to a particular item, you record their time. So what hard dollar is really providing is the ability to enter timesheet information in hard dollar. We can then create an export file for you if you want to download or import into your payroll system so that there was really no double entry. We need the timesheet information for the job tracking because the job tracking then provides what we call the actual cost to compare with the estimated cost. So what we'll do, we'll go through the timesheet warehouse, what it does. We'll have some examples here. I'll enter some data and try to explain the process of what we can do to get the information into the warehouse so that you can then provide that for your job tracking. One of the main things to remember, though, is you need to decide what kind of items you want to track against. So I clicked on the Job Tracking tab of the Job Properties form for a job that I just created. And there's some options here: account code, phase code, CBS code. The account code is designed for those that want to enter cost against an account code. So that basically represents what a accounting system would use. So accounting system usually has dollars that they apply to an account code. Sometimes they're called phase codes, cost codes. So if you want to somewhat mirror what your accounting system uses to track dollars against, there's an account code option. Of course, we provide the account code functionality within hard dollar. You apply the account code to the respective cost items, and that generally summarizes all those dollars into the account code bucket. But the thing with account codes, essentially what you really have is the ability to track cost. Productivity requires a quantity. Well, since an account code can be applied against multiple cost items with multiple unit of measures and multiple quantities, productivity really doesn't become a viable issue when tracking by account code. So hard dollar provides two other options, what we call the phase code or the CBS code. Each of those is simply the ability to track at a cost item level within the cost breakdown structure. The CBS code is simply hard dollar's numbering system to order the hierarchy of your cost breakdown structure. The phase code is really the same thing as far as tracking cost items. It simply allows the user to put their own codes into the cost items if they want. So in a nutshell, the account code is a more broad way to compare costs. The phase code and the CBS code is really the ability to track at the cost item levels. Now, what I'm going to do in this example, in this exercise, is track by the CBS code. Now, we allow you to track at whatever level of the hierarchy you would like. Level 1, Level 2, Level 3, whatever the structure is. But I will say, once you've decided, you really need to keep that same level, because we do not allow you to track cost, timesheet information, at a level 1 and in addition at a level 2. So the levels are important, and what tracking items you're going to decide to track on is very important also. Now there's one other consideration, and this is why you have two options down here for the percent complete. In other words, the percent complete is simply a function of the quantity that you have completed versus what you've expected to complete. So you get that particular percentage. The issue is when you track at a subordinate level and you want to roll up to the superior, what percent complete do you want? So we give you two options. We can calculate that by either the subordinate cost items cost contributions to the superior or the subordinate man-hour contributions to the superior. So you have the option on which one may make more sense for you. So what I'm going to do is go to the timesheet warehouse and start the process of just basically entering time. But there's one other thing to consider. Before we enter time into the warehouse, you need to decide what tracking items you want to track, and then you need to publish those into the warehouse, because the warehouse resides in Hard Dollar's library. So when you enter timesheet information, it's not inside the job itself, it's in the library. So we need to get the information we need from the job into the library. So we have this option here under Tools, Project Execution, and we need to publish the jobs for the project execution. And up comes the jobs that you decide to send the tracking code data into the warehouse. So I'm going to send this one called Timesheet Warehouse. I'll click OK. This lets me know if I want to track changes or not. I do not, so I'll click No on this one. And so now the library essentially has the tracking data I've decided on, so when I do enter information, I have to charge it to something. And what I'm going to charge it to will be a cost item code that I'm interested in. Before we do go to the library, I'm just going to click on the cost breakdown structure. So this is my sample job. And I think basically what I'm going to do is enter cost at this level 2, my 3.1, the excavation. I've got 50,000 yards I'm expecting to do. So this is the cost item I have decided to track information against. So I'm going to go to the library now. I've already opened up some registers. The first one is the employee and machine register. Now, payrolls, timesheets basically need the hours that somebody worked. And so we allow you to set up the employees and or the machines, your equipment, essentially. So when you track hours against a cost item or a tracking code, you can choose the actual people and or the machines that worked on that particular item. Now from Hard Dollar's perspective, this can be very generic if you want to. But in most cases, if you want to mirror now this your payroll system, so you can set up the people that you want that are employed, that you enter time against, you set that up in Hard Dollar, so when we do export that out to your payroll system, you have all the information. And that's why we have these other columns, like an ID number and a payroll type. So these could mirror what you have in your payroll system. There's another column here which is very important, and it's called the resource code. For Hard Dollar to get what we're going to call actual costs, we utilize the rates that are set up in the library for your respective labor codes and or machine codes. From Hard Dollar's perspective, we want to give you accurate enough information in a timely manner so you can really track the job and how you're doing, dollar-wise, production-wise, manner-wise, and so forth. We're not trying to mirror the accounting. So we're going to use the rates that these resource codes used in the library, so these people, in this case employees, are assigned to a particular resource code, and that's the rates, the dollars, the actual cost that Hard Dollar will use when we compare to the estimated cost. There's one other little option here that we provided, and we call them add-ons, and there's 3 columns here. And you can see I've added one called per diem to my project engineer, and I've added one called fuel expense to my Class 3 operator. I'm just going to click in here, and you can see where there are some dollar amounts. So you may, if you choose, set up add-ons, which are simply total dollar amounts that may be applied to either the employees or the machines. So this is kind of an example here. So if I send my project engineer out on a job and I charge him for 8 hours, we're going to charge an additional, in this case per diem, another $200 for that project engineer. Now if this is something that's of value to you, where you set this up is in the library foundation setup data register, and there's a tab here called timesheet add-ons. You can add different descriptions if you like. I just have some examples here for fuel and or per diem. So I just want to mention that. back here on the register what these add-ons really are all about. I'm going to go now to the timesheet warehouse, and right now we're looking at a blank warehouse. I'm in the library. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to enter some timesheets, a few of them, and then I'll come back and explain a little bit more about what's going on. So I'm just going to right click, say new. I could have hit my new green button up here, and so up comes a record mode where I can decide to enter the information and so forth. So I'm going to decide on the period. Now this period can be a day, can be a week, it's up to you. I'm just going to say I'm going to start this on the 11th. So I'm going to have a one-day entry. I now decide my job code. What job am I using? There's one called Timesheet Warehouse. So within that now I decide what item I'm going to track against. And I mentioned I'm going to track against the one called Excavation 3.1. That's my tracking code, the CBS position code. So when I do that, then it displays for me that items, its planned quantity, its unit of measure. Now if I know the quantity completed during this time frame, I can certainly enter it in. So I'm just going to put 1500 here to have some information. Now because of that, just for basic information, we provide for you at the 1500 cubic yards completed from the estimated perspective from the CBS what its cost would be. Now notice we're just displaying employees and machine costs. This would not include any materials or supply costs. Right now we're just displaying labor and equipment essentially. Well, down here now I need to decide who it is I'm at work on this item during that time frame. So I click on my employee machine, click my icon, and up comes the register of my employees and machines. So I can choose whoever I want. Maybe there's some equipment that is involved. I'll just pick a few things here. I'll click OK. So I'm saying essentially these employees and machines worked on this cost item during this time frame, and they worked so many hours. I'll explain more of this information when I get some more data in there. Well, what we show now is the actual, what Hard Dollar calls actual cost based on the hours charged to the employees and machines. So during this time frame, at this cost item, I completed 1,500 yards. I worked 8 hours charged to my employees and machines, so that's a cost. I'm going to click OK. So I've created my first timesheet. Now I'm going to right click and say copy, and right click and say paste. So I created another number. Now Hard Dollar just keeps track of these numbers. There's nothing that you, the user, have to worry about. You can see that I've already, this will be my 18th timesheet that I've created. I've deleted all the others to keep a clean register for us. I'm going to open up this one, change its date to the 12th, and maybe on the 12th I was able to get 1,800 done. But I had to work some overtime to do it. So I'll just put some costs in here. Okay. So on this date, on this cost item, I got more done, but I had to work some overtime, so there's my basic cost comparison for this. Now, during this time frame, maybe we worked on something else. It could have been a different job, could have been the same job. I'll keep it simple, keep the same job, but this time I was able to do some embankment work. So maybe I only got 1,200 done on this. Now normally I would choose different people maybe, whoever worked on this, but just to keep it simple, I'll just put some time in here against this, so have some dollars for us. Okay? I didn't need to do all that, I guess. I'll just zero some of these out just to get some costs. Okay? So if you may notice now, I've entered more than one timesheet entry during this time frame. Again, it could be different jobs. These people may have worked on different jobs. Or during this time you had 2 jobs going, 3 jobs. You can just keep listing and entering in the information, the hours, against whoever you've selected. Okay? So we have some information here. Let me give you the different views that you can choose. Now I've chosen to track codes as columns. So that's what you see here. These are columns. If I keep entering in more timesheets information for tracking codes, it just keeps expanding out to the right for us. But there's another way you can look at it, and we call it tracking codes as tabs. So what that does, it put the tabs up here. So this is always the tab that is highlighted. It's just user preference and how you want to view this. Okay. There's also options here. Maybe you don't need the totals. So we give you a bunch of columns over here. We total information up. Well, they may or may not apply. So if you don't want that, you can turn the totals off. Okay. Down here, you see we got really 3 columns of hours. The ST stands for straight time. That's your employees. The run is the machine time, the total machine cost. Okay? The OT would be overtime hours for your employees. The idle time would be the ownership portion of the machines. If you separated your hourly rates on your equipment by ownership and operating segments, you may just charge the ownership segment if you wanted to. The DT is double time for employees. The OP is the operating expense for the machine. So again, if you separate out the ownership from the operating, you can just enter those hours if you wanted to. Now there's a billable column. Basically, this is for what we call our time and expense, or time and material type cost items, which is not part of this session. So you have that involved. Having said that, if you go back up to the view, you can turn off the overtime, the double time, the billable if you want. If it's not something you're interested in, you can turn it off. If you never enter any double time, you can come down and say, I'll turn the double time off. So there's different views that you can create for this record, and it's customizable. It gives you the information to just have displayed for you, the data fields that are of interest, those that aren't, turn them off. Just a few things that I want to show you as far as the view on the record itself. Notice some other things. We can enter timesheet notes. We can enter notes for the actual tracking code. Okay. There's a diary. You can put tags, weather tags. There's a status notes area. In other words, maybe this job was approved, but then it was changed, so you want to put some status notes here. There's also another tab called Expenses. What the expenses are is the ability for you to enter in additional costs other than just the hours charged for labor and equipment, employees and machines. Now, when I talk about expenses, that brings up another subject, and it's called what we call accrued costs. So down here in my bottom right, you can see maybe it has accrued costs and it says it's off. I'm going to go back up here to the view where it has accrued costs. Now you notice that we have your cost categories. So I'm going to turn this one on, and my rental. Then I'll bring it back up again and show you. What Hard Dollar is doing, basically we want to help you as a project manager and as a timesheet input person to enter in just basic information. We do not want you to become a data input person. That's what accounting is doing. They're keeping track of all the invoices and and all that information. So we're allowing you, if you so choose, to accrue certain types of costs. So in this example here, I've said I want to document my labor owned equipment, rented equipment. And that's what I'm doing here. I entered hours against my employees and machines to get some costs. But maybe this cost item, has supply dollars, has material dollars, and so forth. So what the accrual does is, so when you want to compare the estimated cost with the actuals, so you don't have to record all the material type invoices per se, that's accounting's issue. You could choose to accrual, say, materials. So what Hard Dollar will do when we compare costs back in the job tracking register is to take the percent complete of that item you're tracking against times the estimated material cost for the actual. So for example, if you had a cost item that had $1,000 of material cost, had also labor and equipment costs in there, and you figured you were 50% done on the quantity of that cost item, Hard Dollar will accrue 50% of the $1,000 of material cost. So we'd have $500 to represent the actual cost when we compare the actual totals, labor, equipment, and materials, to the estimated cost. So we're really trying to make it easy, more simplified as far as data input, so that you can have accurate enough information when you compare this in a job tracking register between the estimated and what we're going to call the actuals. So in my example here, I'm going to accrue these cost categories and document my labor and equipment. Now, just because you made this selection doesn't mean it just turned on. So if I decide to display my accrued cost, so if I were back in the job tracking register, I would display my accrued costs. And when I do, my status down here at the bottom right is nice and red. It tells me that my accrued costs are on. So let's go back to expenses. Now, even though I'm documenting labor, equipment, and rentals, I still may want to enter additional costs, whether they're accrued or not. So I'm going to right-click down here and say New, and up comes a form where I could put a description. Maybe I'll put something like small tools for I need to purchase something I really want to make part of the cost, so I give it a description. Different expense types. Ad hoc means I can enter in my own cost. I can choose a resource type. I could use a subcontractor. I could come over here and choose the seller if I wanted to. Okay. I can put tags. I can put more notes to this thing. So I'm going to say, on small tools, I had another $500 for supplies. I could put a different quantity here. I could change the measure. So essentially what I've said, I want to add $500 regardless if they're accrued or not. So that's what this little check mark down here is. So if I want to add this $500, whether I've accrued or not, I would simply check this. So now when I would bring this information down to the job tracking register, I would have that $500 to compare with my estimated versus now my new actuals. So the expense area allows you to add any kind of expense cost that you want at any time. You can choose it to be displayed whether you're accrued or not. So that's what the expense is about. I'll click OK. I come back. We display this. Now understand this $500 is not displayed up here. We're in the timesheet warehouse. So essentially this is comparing my employees and machines. But this $500 will be displayed when we download this information to the job tracking register. Well, I've entered in a couple timesheets, a couple days and durations. I'll click OK. We'll come back to the timesheet register. You can see where I've got two of these timesheets entered. Well, let's take a look at this. This register is really, I'm going to move the thing here for us. This register is fairly large. We provided a lot of different views for you. Don't be afraid to look at some of these views. I'm going to my standard view here. I'm going to best fit all my columns so you can see the information. Now essentially, Hard Dollar provides the ability for management of the timesheet information. You see a status here. It's called pending. Okay? So I'm just going to right click on one of these, and down here you can see where we have the ability to enter different statuses. Was it submitted? Has it been approved? Was it rejected? Do we need to revise it? Okay, maybe it was rejected for something. There's an approve and publish, two things at once. There's this publish now. The publish status is the status that allows the timesheet data to be downloaded into the job tracking register. Any other status will not allow the data to be downloaded into the job tracking. It's the publish. Let's just go through a simple example here. Say for some reason I rejected this. It wasn't right. You can see my status is rejected. But I don't want to delete it because I want to have some kind of an audit trail. So I'm going to right click and say revise. And you notice here it's got 17.01. So the first one was rejected. My new revised one says pending. So now I can open this up and make changes. Maybe these one guys only worked 7 hours on this one. I made a change. So we can revise up to essentially 100 different revisions for a timesheet, so you have a nice audit trail. There's also information before I publish this. This register is pretty good. Gives me some pretty detailed information, but we have a couple of views here I want you to be aware of. There's one called Timesheet Details. So I'm going to click on that. And basically it's another register of all the timesheet detail information. The job, the tracking code, the employees' machines, the account code, all this information, the descriptions. A lot of information there. I'm going to keep on going over. There's my add-on dollars that I got. And then here's my straight time and overtime. Here's the hours. We provided some views for you. This is just like any other register in Hard Dollar. You can create your own views. So how about this one? It says summary view, employees by the week. So we set this up. I can click on the week. There's my employees. So for this particular week on Jack Reed, it's got 32 hours straight time, 1 hour overtime. Where were they at? Well, they were charged to these tracking codes for that job, and there's the information. Like any other register, we can send this out to Excel. We can print this, send it to a PDF. So when you really understand that this register essentially provides you the ability to create your own reports of all that detailed information. We call that the Timesheet Details Register. I'll close that down. Now if you entered in expenses, we have a Timesheet Expense Register, which displays the data for the timesheet, the expense entries that you made. Click on the plus box, and here's the specifics. Okay. And again, this can be sent out to Excel if you want to. So essentially, this register provides basic information. You can go to the details and get really detailed information, print those out, create your own views. Great way to create your own reports from within Hard Dollar for the timesheet information. There's something here so I want you to be aware of too. We call it this filter timesheets. See, the issue is that I know companies that have 50, 75,000 timesheets that have been entered. Well, we don't want to keep displaying all that volume of timesheets, so we allow you to filter. So our default is, how many timesheets do you want to display? Do you want to go back so many days? You want to filter within a period? You want to just go to a particular job? So this filter allows you to just display, the most previous ones or the specific ones you want to see without loading all thousands and thousands and thousands of timesheets. So that's important information to understand. Also, the timesheet warehouse works a little different than it does throughout the other registers in hard dollar. Notice up here we tell you when this was last updated. In other words, this needs to be saved. And the reason for that is for performance. This tells me when it was updated. So if you guys are working on a network and multiple people are entering in timesheets, you need to essentially periodically refresh it because it tells you when the last date and time it was refreshed so that you are current. Okay. Back to this, I just want to mention something else, back to this timesheet filter. Now, hard dollar allows you to enter timesheets at a future date. It can be tomorrow or the next day. You can do that. But if the filter here is only showing a certain date, you won't see those here on the register. So be aware of that this filter has a certain date to it. So if you entered timesheets at a future date, you won't see that here unless you change that filter options. So we have the timesheet register. Now, when you decided the status, if you decided now that they've been approved and they're ready for the manager to bring the information down to the job tracking register, you need to publish it. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to simply select these, right click, and I'm going to say approve and publish. And this confirms the ones you want. I'll say OK. And notice that the status here says approved. I'm going to scroll over because I want you to notice there's two important columns here, and they say published date and published cost. Now this first one is not published because I revised it. So only the revised one will have the cost and the man hours and equipment hours that will be downloaded into the job tracking register. So that's what that published information is all about. It allows us to decide or give you the ability to manage this process between submitted, approved, rejected, revised, and then published. There's one other thing I do want to look at, and what's called timesheet printouts. You can create little printouts, if you like, of your timesheets. So I'm going to click on this. I won't go through a whole lot of this, but it gives you a lot of options. You could print out a blank timesheet form so that people can enter the hours into it. It could include the people that you already set up. In other words, you could create the employees, okay, and the machines, create the printout, the report, send it to them, they can print it out. Or you can print it out with the results of the hours that you have entered. So there's a lot of options here. I won't go through all of them right now, but just to let you know, play around with this, turn some things on, some things off, see how the views are and so forth. So if you want a standard kind of format that you want to send out to the field that they can enter their time against, we do provide a specific format that is, if it's some value, you can certainly use it. Or if you entered information after the fact, the hours, charts against employees and machines, you can print this out, send it out for approval, and so forth. So there's a lot of options here. Depends exactly what you want. Again, that was under File, Print Selected, Timesheets. Well, basically, that's the session on the timesheet warehouse, our employment tracking. Hope this had some value for you. So I'm going to, at this point, close down the session, and I thank you for viewing.